Hey, it's Drybear. Today I'm going to walk you through the second Abyssal dungeon in Tier 3, Oreha Preveza. If you're looking for the first dungeon, Idra's Oculus, you'll find that linked on screen and down in the description. And as the title suggests, I'm going to split this video into two parts. The first part, I will explain everything that you need to know about this Abyssal dungeon in just 60 seconds. Then we'll spend the rest of the video, the second part, going over everything in a lot more depth, including how to read body language, animations, and every major mechanic in detail. So let's go. But first, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Who knows? I might even be streaming right now. Let's begin with Oreha Preveza in just 60 seconds. First boss, stagger him to remove his damage buff. Getting 3 debuffs on you will stun you. Destroy totems to weaken him, but doing so will stun you after a few seconds. Stand near him when the platform is on fire to avoid the stacking burn. If he starts beating his chest, don't hit him or he'll slam the entire party with massive damage. Avoid his whirlwind by stepping out of the circle. You can use time stop potions here to defend. Second boss, Albion swaps between 2 stances, earth and lightning. Failing a stagger check puts him in the 3rd stance, a fury state with stacking damage. Stagger him to break him out. Wind Dance makes you remember a sequence of safe zones in order to stay alive. Thunder Dance requires all 4 players to stand in the center or it's a wipe. Spread out for star patterns. Match the pattern on his back to survive the damage that follows. Safe zones appear in a sequence as shown on screen. Each star pattern only appears once, so you know what the last one will be every time. Oh, all right, let's go through Oreha Preveza without a time restriction. Quick tip for the trash clear: if you all stand in the corner, they will all aggro you and stack up a lot easier if you're wondering how to make this a little more enjoyable. Let's start with the first boss, the Maguro Captain. He begins with a stagger bar in the first phase at the top of the screen, and while this stagger bar is not depleted, he will gain a damage buff and his attacks will apply a debuff to you. When you get 3 stacks of this debuff, it will stun you for about a second, which can be exceptionally painful if there's other mechanics going on. He will periodically summon totems on the ground floor, usually 3 at a time, and when you have these up, he will gain a damage buff on him. Destroy these to remove the damage buff. The risk here is that when you destroy one of the totems, you will get a debuff on you that after a few seconds, you will get stunned and someone will need to break you out. This can be seen by the black aura that comes off of you after you destroy a totem. And of course, if you destroy separate totems and you're the last people remaining, it can be a huge wipe. He has 2 different phases, the normal phase and then the fire phase. He will light the platform on fire, and if you're standing out in the fire, you'll get a stacking burn buff. It starts to hurt real bad, but you can cleanse this by standing in the circle of water that's right next to him, which will remove all your stacks and remove the damage. There's a few things you need to worry about when you're standing right next to him. The biggest one is going to be his whirlwind. If at any point you see him roar and bring his elbows back. So let's see if we can actually show that here real quick. So you'll see him swing an attack here, and then when he turns to face someone, he will actually bring his elbows back like this, and then he'll let out a big roar. That means he's about to do a whirlwind. So you can watch that again real quick. He'll turn, go, wah, shoulder or elbows back, and then he'll do this giant whirlwind. There's a few ways you can deal with this. You might just want to step out into the fire, and then you can use things like time stop potions to become invulnerable for a few seconds. You can get trapped in the whirlwind, taking a bunch of damage, and then he'll usually follow up the whirlwind with a big AoE slam attack, which does a bunch of damage. So again, time stop is your friend here. The other major mechanic is his retaliation state. This is something that isn't really well explained right now in Western Lost Ark, and it's very easy to miss this. But if you at any point you see him start to beat his chest, let me see if I can show that real quick. So you'll see him raise his eyes up, and then he'll start just pounding his chest. That means he's entered into a retaliation state. A retaliation state in Lost Ark means that if any point you damage him during the retaliation state, he will retaliate. So you can see here, I didn't read the chest beating here, so I attacked him right after, causing the big AoE explosion, which does a bunch of damage to everybody. So if any point you see him beating his chest like this, you just have to wait until he stops before you can damage him again. There are a few bosses right now in Lost Ark that have this mechanic. None of them are all that punishing, but there's a lot more retaliation coming in future boss encounters. So it's worth learning this now, that when he beats his chest, just don't hit him. The next big mechanic is going to be his replacement for the whirlwind. So again, you'll see him roar. He'll bring his elbows back like this, and then he'll let out a big roar. And once he does that, he's either going to do the whirlwind, or more likely, if you're lucky, because this is a pretty easy mechanic, later on in the fight, he'll start doing pizza slices. So he'll begin by making smaller slices. You can actually see these here. He'll create these and then let out a moderate amount of damage. It won't kill you when it hits you. The big thing though is it will give you a stack of a debuff. The debuff that when you get to 3, it stuns you. So if you do get hit by one of these and you have high debuff stacks, it can actually cause you to get hit by another one, and you can just keep getting hit. And progressively, as he goes through this, the slices get bigger and bigger and bigger, so you have less safe spot to stay when he's doing this. I think the last one is like mostly gone here, and then he does this little star pattern. So this one I think is probably the better of the two, because you can still damage him while he's doing this, depending on your class and how fast it is. But you definitely want to be aware of that. And if you ever get caught in this, just make sure that you know that it does give you the debuff. So if you get hit 3 times, you can get stunned, which means you'll get hit more times, and then you can get comboed. Now let's talk about Big Bad, the second boss, Corrupted Albion. This one has a lot of variation to it, depending on what stance he's in, when he triggers mechanics, and what HP he's at as well. So let's go through everything you need to know about Corrupted Albion. So he will start the encounter in one of his 2 normal stances, either Earth, which looks like this. He's got wind all over him, and he's got like this earthy brown sand-like glow to him, or he'll start it as lightning. If you stagger him, he will swap from Earth to lightning and lightning to Earth, and this will change his abilities as well. So during Earth, he does a lot of swipes and jumps and circle AoEs, and during lightning, he does a lot of ground targets. He projects lightning out. And then he has a third stance, which kind of sits in the middle, and this is going to be his Fury stance. In his Fury stance, he'll have this red glow around him, and keep in mind that when you're doing Albion on hard, he starts with Fury active, and he'll start getting a stacking damage buff on his bar. As you can see on his bar here, every large chunk of time, I think it's like 15 seconds or so, he'll get another stack of this damage buff, and then it'll keep going up and up as long as he's in that Fury stance. And the only way to break him out of this is to fully deplete his stagger bar at the top. So once you do that, he will swap stances and then lose his Fury stacks and become a lot less threatening. And again, keep in mind that if you're doing this on normal, he won't start in Fury, but if you are doing it on hard, he will have Fury active as soon as you begin the encounter, and he'll start accruing stacks. He'll periodically do stagger checks, and if you fail one of these, he will gain the Fury stance, and if you pass it, he'll just swap stances. So it actually doesn't really matter all that much if you fail these. It just means that he'll start gaining Fury stacks, but if you're burning him properly, it doesn't mean you can't beat him. It just means that he'll gain those Fury stacks and start getting a little more aggressive. Now he has 2 different dance moves that require you to position properly to avoid them. The first one I'm going to call Wind Dance, and it looks like this. He'll get this big whirlwind in the middle of the screen. You need to go to the middle of the map and stand there, and then when you get there, after a few seconds, you'll see a pattern appear on the screen. So it's going to show you a series of safe zones. He'll split the screen up into 3 parts. So if you treat this as 1, 2, and 3, and then it'll show you a sequence of safe zones in an order that you have to remember. So it's a memory game. So it'll start out and show a couple in an order, and then nothing will happen. And then once you know the order, then you have to follow the order to survive. So in this case, if we look at this one here, you can see that it goes, the first one is middle, then the next one is right, then middle, then right. So we have to follow that afterwards to survive. So the first one's middle, then it's right, then it's middle, then it's back to right, and you survive. So that's the memory game for the Wind Dance. He does this almost every time. So when you see the big whirlwind, just run to the center, look for the memory game, look for the safe zones, and then run to them. The other dance I'll call his Thunder Dance, and it's far more problematic. He'll do a little animation, then fly up into the air and disappear. And all throughout the area, you'll get these big AoEs that spawn, and then you'll have these lightning orbs that appear that will stun you for a few seconds if they hit you, and then they'll all chase towards people in the party. The big problem here is that you have to get all 4 players into the center of the screen, or it will kill everyone. And this means that, of course, in this case, which is why I wanted to show it, we have a party member who's dead before that check happens. And since there's only 3 living party members in the middle of the screen, we all wipe here. So the big game with this is you want to avoid the initial AoEs that are going all over the screen, lead the balls in such a way where you don't get hit by them because they will stun you, and then you want to get everyone alive into the middle of the screen so that you can pass this check and not die. Next, let's talk about the final game that you'll play with Corrupted Albion, and it looks like this. So you'll set the sequence of safe zones that appear. And if you look onto his back, you'll see a symbol appear on it. So you're looking at the top, like the small of his back. There's going to be a circle here with a pattern. It'll be 3 different patterns. It'll be the count. So it's going to be a pattern with a star with 4. So 4 points. It's going to be a pattern of 6 with 6 points, or it'll be a pattern with 8 that has 8 points going across it. So you're looking for one of these 3 patterns, 4, 6, or 8 before you go to the safe zones. Once he shows this, a bunch of safe zones will appear on your screen. You can see that we have this pattern here listed behind his back. He's showing 6, which means that if you go to a 6 location and stand on it, you'll get a 6 angle buff that looks just like the one you have. And then you will not take damage from the shockwave that follows. And he does this in a series of 3. So you just have to go to a 6, stand on it, get 6 angles of protection. If it says 6, it'll hit the shockwave, you'll be safe, and then you'll want to do the next 2. Now, he always does these once for each symbol. So he'll do a 4, a 6, and an 8. Now that he's just done the 6, he won't do the 6 again. So the next one's going to be either a 4 or an 8. So you'll see him do it. We get the 8 here. So the 8 pattern, we know that the 8 pattern is the safest. So we'll go and stand on that, get that buff. And then once this is done, now we know the last one's going to be 4. And he'll do it following this sequence, which is a little odd until you do it a bunch of times and you get used to it. But the first one's just going to be a full circle around his body. There can be any number of these can be scattered. You can get a bunch of 6s together. It's actually quite a bit of a mess, but you don't have to go very far to get these. The second set will always be a clump of 3s. You can go to the 4 corners of the area, and then you'll get a clump of 3, a 4, a 6, and an 8, which means that just make sure you call out your directions like top right, top left, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, whatever it is. Just make sure that you're covering these corners and standing in it. Now, the last one's going to be the hardest check, because not only is it, as you can see, the furthest away from him, which means you have the furthest to travel, but it also follows a very odd pattern. But there's a trick to it. You know at this point what the star pattern is going to be if you've been paying attention. It's the symbol you haven't seen. So if you saw a 2 and an 8, you know it's a 6. If you saw a 2 and a 4, you know it's an 8. It's the missing number that you haven't seen up until this point. And it will always follow the pattern that I'm showing on screen here. A copy of each of the safe zones will be right next to each other and then placed across the entire arena on the complete opposite side. 4s will always be at north and south. The 8s will always be mostly west and east. And the 6s will mostly be at the bottom right and the top left. So you can see this built into 2 different sections. The problem with this is it's pretty far apart. If you are someone like, let's say 3 people go to the pair on one side, one of those people is gonna have to run all the way across to the other side. So the best way to do this is just to split up into pairs based on whether you're on the left side or the right side. Go straight to where it is. You know where you have to run if you're paying attention, because you know what number it's gonna be. So you can just go there and stand there. And if you ever get into a situation like this, say I'm a 3rd person that's standing here and I can see that the 2 4s are here and here, and we know it's a 4. Now I run up as the 3rd person. I've seen people then just start perusing like in either direction, looking for a safe spot. But looking at this cheat sheet, you know that the answer, the safe spot for you is going to be on the other side. So all you have to do is just run to the complete opposite side of the circle to find your safe spot. Then once you finish that, you'll get back into normal. He'll usually enrage, go straight into his Fury stance here right after that, and then you'll go back and fight him normal, and he'll have all his mechanics back again. Now let's cover a few minor mechanics that won't have a huge impact, but it's good to know about anyways. The first of these is going to be the little clown that spawns that looks just like this. When he spawns, he will target a player with a crosshair over their head, which means that he's now aggroed onto that player permanently. He will then start to chase the player until he dies. And if he reaches the player that has the mark on them, then he will explode with a big, massive blue AoE, which will put darkness on everyone in the group, which limits their vision. So to prevent this mechanic from causing any problems with your party, what you'll have to do is that when you have a target over your head, usually I like to, if I'm the person that has it, I like to ping the clown so that everyone knows exactly where it is. And then everyone else who's not targeted with that crosshair now needs to go kill that clown before it reaches the person, so you don't have to worry about the CC. It is darkness, which isn't the end of the world, but maybe it comes at a point where you really need to see what's around you, so it can be a big pain. But that is that mechanic. The next is a mechanic you may not see all that much because you can only do it at the end of the fight, but it is a memory game pizza slice mechanic. So you'll see these show up in sequence, and he'll do this kind of star pattern, like radiation symbol pattern. So he'll do 2 of these in a row, and then you'll see that there's safe spots here, here, and here, and then he'll do another one right after. So what you have to do is when he starts this mechanic, he flashes it really fast. So the first one he flashes, you know that this is a safe spot, that's a safe spot, that's a safe spot. And then right after, he's gonna flash the opposite. And then after a few seconds, he'll do it in the order that he said. So you wanna run to the first safe spot, and then run to the second safe spot, and you're good to go. And that's how that one goes. Next, let's talk about one that I see almost everyone get hit by, including myself. It's gonna be the one that he does when he's in Earth Stance, or when he's in full Fury like this. He does basically all the moves from everything. It'll create this kind of like clock wipe effect, and then he'll swing his tail that follows after. So you'll see him kind of do this. It'll like create this mark. So like right here, you see this little whooshing effect on the outside. He makes this, and then he'll sweep and do a big AoE. But there is a couple safe zones here. Obviously, the part that he didn't show with the AoE over here is a safe spot. So if you're ranged or melee, you can sit over there. But there are actually a few safe spots right underneath him, right next to his feet. So if you know he's going to do this, and it's a very sequenced combo, he does it all the time. And when he's in Fury, he'll sometimes do it twice in a row. But just kind of look for those under the wing. There he goes again. And sometimes he'll do it. He'll probably do it. Yep, he does it twice in a row here. But you can go right underneath his, right underneath his feet, or on his back left foot is this safe zone on the other side as well. And that's everything you need to know about Corrupted Albion. I'm sure at this point, if you've been playing since launch, you've been killing him a bunch. But if you're brand new to the game or still getting caught up with everyone else, I wanted to make sure I at least did this guide, so that I have a guide out for all the content, so that you can not miss out on anything. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.